some of the stuff you saw in those videos was actually some relighting stuff. They didn't show the specific relighting process, but it was something that they would typically use. The main idea with this is it was actually when District 9 came out, they wanted a way that they could interactively light the characters and kind of modify some of their materials after the fact. So they developed this set of tools or methods to do that, and then we actually have it packaged up in a nice little area that we can then use. So on Canvas, you'll be able to download the stuff for that. I have to just link my stuff because I have it put into my other folder. Come on. Let's go to this Dropbox. Relighting, copy. And that. That. I was close on that one probably. Andy Relight. Oh, it was Andy Relight, that's right. All right. All right, so I don't need this right now. All right, so this is essentially what we're going to create. It's not going to be this huge mess. We're going to make this a little bit cleaner. But what we want to be able to do is, here is this Andy character. Nope, something's off. One's off. Go back to frame 1. Nope. All right, forget that. We'll just go over here and read it all in again. All right, so we have this Andy hologram video like this. I'm going to, that's what I have wrong. My frame range is not set to the correct frame range. So Andy goes from 1 to 220, so I'm going to go 1 to 220. There we go. And this is a different rig. Jerry was one of the rigs that we used for animation class. This is Andy, different rig. It has different controls. One of the reasons I switched to Andy in this one is because Andy can blink, where Jerry has a hard time blinking. Yeah. He is. All right, so that's the idea of it, right? And so let's say that those holograms, they're kind of like floating around, because that's the idea with this one, is that there be holograms floating around Andy, and Andy's interacting with these, maybe looking at things. Think of Iron Man with his helmet, kind of looking around, controlling stuff with his eyes, right? So I want to be able to light Andy and control the lighting on Andy so that I can have different effects happen. I could do that in 3D, but if the colors of my lights were to change, the color of my hologram were to change, then I would have to go back to 3D and re-render this out, and I don't want to do that, okay? So with this one, I'm just going to set up my settings real quick. So I'm going to go to my project directory. I'm going to set this to my D drive, P drive. Oh, this isn't fall. Winter 2560 and relighting. There we go. Make sure this is all set. 1220, yes. 960 by 540. 960 by 540. All right, so that's all set. Okay. So I'm going to go and do a layer contact sheet. And I'll say show layer names. This is just so you can see it. You don't have to do this part, but I do want you just to be able to see what comes with this. If you remember back to our very first assignment where we had that game station, we did the same kind of thing. So you can see all the different passes that I'm giving you so you can see what we're working with. In this case, we're working with two new ones. One of them is a normal pass. The other one is a position pass. The normal pass basically tells the 3D software which direction each one of these faces or each one of these points is facing. Okay, that might sound weird, but that's just how it works. So like this is facing a certain direction, this is facing a certain direction, and we end up with this colorful thing. You don't need to know the math behind it, but that's what it is. Typically a normal pass will look like this. You'll have the magenta and this blue and typically some greens and yellows in there too. This one is a position pass. So think of like your 3D world that we used in the last assignment. The position pass will show you the actual X, Y, and Z position of every single pixel. So if I were to zoom in here, let me go to the end so I can actually get closer to that. There we and I put my mouse over this point, you'll see that the red is 0.846, the green is 0.46 whatever, and the blue is negative whatever. As I start moving this around, that's the actual X, Y, and Z position of every single one of those points. And so the idea with these two passes is that if we put these two together, Nuke can actually create or rebuild the 3D model without bringing in the 3D model, okay? So this is what we're going to do. Just set that aside for now. Position 2 points. All right, so I'm going to create a position to points node, and this is simply a preview thing. This is not something we'll be using for our end assignment. It's something that will allow us to see this thing actually in 3D. So this position to points, I'm going to tell it that the point is going to be the P. I'm going to tell it that the normal is going to be the N. And now if I come into here and hit F, there's my character. And as I spin around, you can see that the character doesn't have a backside because the camera only renders what it sees in front. It doesn't render the back of the image, obviously. So this gives us a pretty good idea of what's happening inside here. And if I were to click and drag, you can see that I can have this animation like update as it's going. Now this gives a whole world of things you can actually do. This could be a separate rendering that you would do to this character because you have all these different points that are there. You could also create a piece of geometry and replace every single one of those points with that piece of geometry. All right, so this is, again, just our preview stuff. I'll, again, set that off to the side. This is our just preview area. All right. So now what I want to do is I'm going to add what's called a relighting node. Relight. And if I look at this, you'll see there's a lights area and a color area. So it should be pretty self-explanatory here, but this goes to color because that's the color. And then I need a light so I can actually relight this. So I'm going to go to my 3D box here, go to lights, and then I'm going to add in, just for starting off, I'm going to add in a point light. Now you'll see that this position of points is actually getting lit up. That has no bearing on what we're actually seeing. It's just a matter of this is a 3D item and this is a 3D item. That's why I like to have this here so I can see where my light is. Without that, I can't see where the light is in relationship to Andy. Okay, so I always keep it there just so I have that connection. So I'm going to connect this lights to that point. Okay, now the second I do that, let me disconnect it here real quick. Get off there. There we go. The second I do that, watch on the left side of relight, we'll get another arrow, and this one says camera. So it wants to know, just like the last one, where's the camera aimed at this spot. So I'm going to go to my camera node. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to read from the file. So you also have a Relight FBX in there too. Yes. And that will get connected to the camera. Now let me set this aside here for a second. Now as I drag this to this one, we'll also see another thing pop out that says material. Okay. So different materials, if you've used 3D before, different materials are going to light up different ways. Something that is super shiny might spread the light across it. Something that's very dull might have a very small area that's actually getting lit up. So that's all found in the same area. Here's the box, here's the shaders, and then for now we'll use a Fong. And then I'm just going to drag this onto material, and that should be the last one that pops out. Okay. So let's view the relight. There it is. I'll hit Tab to get out of this view, and then I'll see that I don't see anything happening. All right, so let's go to Relight and make sure everything's connected. So normal vectors is not set up, so let's set this to normal. We see this black and white version. Here's point position, so let's set this to P. And now we're getting an actual like relighting setup. Okay, so let's clean up our mess before we go any further. Well, why didn't that work? Control, no, I guess I want to move whatever. Drag this here, drag this here. Again, these are just for preview, something I might use later. And then I will drag all of this stuff right there. There we go. All right. So now I can take this point light that's right here, and I can move it over. Now if I hit Tab, let me close all my windows here. If I hit Tab and see this in 3D, you'll see that I see the point light, but I don't see Andy in the viewport. That's why I like to have, again, this position of points here, so that as I click on this light and move it, I get a little preview of what's happening, okay? So it just makes your life a little bit easier to see that there, okay? So I'm going to take this and just kind of position it off to the side for now. I'll hit tab again to get out of there. And now I can see this thing being lit up. Now the purpose of this is that it's not going to light up the entire Andy so that it looks the same. We're basically getting what is a lighting piece of information. That's what we're after. And then we're going to take that information and use it with the original footage to relight Andy, okay? So think of this just like this highlight right here, which is super white, and then this grayish area right there, okay? I'm going to do a merge. And then the relight will be A, and the B will be this thing, and then I will connect a little node right there so that it looks nice. There we go. Oops. All right, so it looks the same. I'm going to switch this from over to multiply. And then what we're going to see is that now Andy is actually being relit based off of the stuff. Here is the original, super bright and kind of nice and smooth, whatever. What are you doing, Nuke? There you go. Let me save this before it crashes. And then here is the adjusted. So you can see how we're able to relight this entire model. Now it's different than us just making the right side of Andy brighter and the left side of Andy darker, because we're picking up all these extra highlights and stuff here. That's something that we don't get just by adjusting like the brightness of Andy. This interacts specifically with her. If we had an environment and we had all these different screens in there and we wanted to show off the screens kind of illuminating stuff, same thing. We would see this kind of like interaction with the lights in all of our geometry. You can have shadows and stuff, but we're not doing that, okay? Now, to adjust what this is doing to Andy and how it's interacting with it, we go to the Fong. This is where it's going to control the color of Andy originally. This is where it's going to control the amount of diffuse, the specularity, and then the shininess, okay? So we'll go one at a time. So here's the color, okay? So we take the color off and we basically get this super dark, but maybe we wanted to have more of an isolated thing. Maybe we wanted something that shows kind of like Andy in the dark and then the light comes up kind of thing. We could do that too. Maybe we want something just a little bit more dim, right? Emission is something for glowing. We really don't need that for this. Here's diffuse, which is just the original color. Here's specularity. So this is the shininess, and this is typically what we'll need to adjust. So there's a specular, which is just the brightness of that highlight. And then this shininess here is controlling how big that area is. Okay, so something like that might be pretty good. And then maybe take the specular down a little bit. And then I can go to my point light and then just make the intensity of this maybe a little bit brighter. So let's say 3. And now we're able to take that and just relight it, okay? So it's not a huge modification as far as like what the setup is, but the possibilities are really what we're after, okay? Now, this is doing a multiply on here. I'm going to copy this and paste it, and I'm going to do this again. Okay, so now we have the same thing we just had a second ago, except this time I'm going to set this to be a plus. And the difference in this is that instead of it taking the white value and just making it brighter, okay, this is the result we get. It's taking the black and multiplying it, so everything that's black gets darker, everything that's white is going to stay the same brightness, but then everything that's gray is just going to drop off. The plus is actually going to add that color on top of the other color. So that way we're still able to see the original color information from Andy, but maybe add a tint to it, let's say. So let's go back to this, and I'm just going to give this a little bit more of an adjustment. So I'm going to go to my point light. There it is. I'm going to pick a different color. And you'll see how I'm able to give this a little bit of a different tint of color to it. Let's go with blue. Let's go with that. And then let's take the intensity down. There it is. And maybe take the blue down a little bit more. There we go. All right, so this is basically just like a, you can't see it very good. There you go. This is just like a hint of blue kind of thing that's on top of Andy. So now when I go here and I'm looking at that, I don't think we can see it very good because I just blew it out. There it is. Oops. Let's look a little bit closer here. All right, you can definitely see there's like a bluish now tint that's on top of Andy. I'll make it a little bit more apparent, again, just so you can see it on the projector. There it is. Now it's really blue, okay? So again, this has some really cool purposes because we may want to have this kind of thing happen based off of Andy's looking at a hologram, the hologram is lighting up Andy's face, then the hologram goes off, and now the light goes off, right? So we want those things to be easy to manipulate. Oops. So if I go into my position of points, there it is. I can delete that point light. And I'm going to add some extra lights in here. So this is only one light setup. If I wanted multiple light setups, I have to add multiple lights to this, and I can't do it right from here. I'm going to add a scene node. And then all my lights that I want, I'll add into this. So I'm going to go over here to my box, go to lights, and then go to light here. Come on, there you go. And then this one we'll do a spotlight. I'll hold down Control, rotate it. There it is. Move it up. Oops, wrong way. Come on. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. That's why I didn't go up. I'll give this a little tint. I'm also going to add some fall off to this. Fall off will allow the light to gradually drop off. So when I put this at 2, the light's probably dying at about here. I need to really kick up the intensity so that it gets to Andy. So I'm going to go to maybe 200. There it is, 300. It creates a more natural looking light. In 3D, typically that's what we will do with that kind of setup. There we go, like that. I can also go with the cone angle and make the angle bigger or smaller. Also, I can change the penumbra angle, which we're not really seeing a huge difference, and cone fall off just to help soften those. There we go. And let's take this cone fall off down and this down. Oops, too far down there. All right, there we go. Then I'm going to duplicate the light, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. There we go. And then I can take the light and then scoot it over to, let's say, the other side. Hold Control, drag it around so it points at Andy. If it helps, you can always disable the other light so you can still see where it's aiming. Come on. There it is. And then obviously we'll adjust the brightness. We'll adjust the color here. Maybe this is a green light hitting it. Now we'll turn the other light on, and now we will look back at our merge. There we go. All right, and then again, because I'm adding it on top of there, maybe I do need to crank up that intensity even further, especially so you guys can see that effect happening. Oops, that's too much. There we go. All right, and then it's going to animate too. So the lights are still in that same spot, but because Andy's like rotating around and moving her face, these lights are still locked into these positions. So for the assignment, what I want you to do is obviously create the setup, but then go through and play with the lighting on it. If you wanted to make more of a piece to this, you could definitely add in some hologram stuff if you wanted. But the idea is get some lights in there and animate them. Maybe turn them off, turn them on as Andy's looking around. Maybe move some of the lights as it's in the scene. You can animate all of these things down here. You could adjust the intensity, so if you wanted one to kind of brighten up and then dim down, you could do that too. I really killed that light. There we go. Okay, and then you'll just bake that out. Write that to a movie, put it in After Effects, and then render it out. Pretty straightforward, right? Obviously, node graph, all that stuff. You don't need to put any more submission sheets. The few that I have still here, I'm going to pass back. Everything else, when you drop it in the folder, I'm just going to grab it and then grade it right into Canvas.